Not delayed, not misdelivered, not hiding behind the azaleas like the delivery app sometimes claimed, just gone. Staff Sergeant Daniel Cole had been home barely 3 weeks from his last deployment, and all he wanted was the simple pleasure of opening the box that held the custom gear he'd ordered for his new garage gym. After years of squatting in sand, hauling ammo crates, and bench pressing whatever passed for weights in the desert, he'd promised himself one indulgence: an Olympic bar set. But when he got home from a short run that morning, the front stoop was bare. Only a faint rectangle of clean concrete suggested that something heavy had been sitting there just hours earlier. He frowned, wiped sweat from his forehead, and scanned the street. Kids pedaled down the cul-de-sac, a lawn service hummed nearby, and his neighbor 2 houses over wrestled with a garden hose. But directly across the street there she was. Karen. Blonde bob, oversized sunglasses, robe that screamed, "I'm too important for pants." She was dragging something bulky across her lawn toward her garage, muttering to herself as she went. Daniel's pulse quickened. The size and shape of the box were unmistakable. It was his package. At first he laughed. It wasn't the sharp bark of combat or the kind that followed gallows humor in the barracks, but a disbelieving chuckle that rolled into a shake of the head. After all the things he'd survived overseas, he'd come home only to find himself watching a suburban neighbor attempt to boost his brand new Olympic bar set like some amateur smuggler. He crossed the street. "Hey," he called, tone casual but firm, the way he might address a private caught sneaking an extra ration. "That looks heavy. Want me to help?" Karen froze mid-drag. For a moment she didn't turn, just hunched over the box as though sheer denial could make him vanish. Then she whirled, her oversized shades sliding down her nose. "This," she said, voice pitched with false innocence. "This is community property. You left it outside. Safety hazard." Daniel blinked. "That's a barbell set, ma'am. Pretty sure I ordered it, not the HOA." Karen sniffed, pulling her robe tighter. "Packages left unattended are subject to," she hesitated, clearly scrambling, "neighborhood protocol. I'm safeguarding it until proper identification is confirmed." He stared at her, speechless for a beat. Somewhere in his mind he could hear his squad leader's voice, "Stay calm, Cole. Don't escalate until you need to." But this wasn't Kandahar, and he wasn't facing insurgents. This was his driveway, his neighborhood, his damn package. "You want ID?" he asked dryly. "I've got dog tags, a military ID, and the delivery app with my name on it. Unless you want me to call the carrier." Karen's lips thinned into a smirk. "Oh please. Soldiers think they can wave that around like it gives them special rights. Around here, I enforce the rules." That did it. He felt the heat rising, the same pressure that built before a firefight, only this time fueled by absurdity instead of fear. "Ma'am, put the box down." But Karen only tightened her grip on the cardboard and began edging it toward her garage door opener. Daniel exhaled slowly, remembering every de-escalation drill the army had ever drilled into him. Direct confrontation would only feed her need for control. He needed to outmaneuver, not overpower. So he changed tactics. "All right. If you want to claim HOA authority, then you'll want everything documented. Let's get the police involved. I'm sure they'll love hearing you safeguarded a package with my name on it." Karen's eyes widened just a fraction before narrowing into slits. "Fine," she hissed. "But don't think this is over." She released the box with exaggerated reluctance, as though she were doing him a favor. Daniel dragged it back across the street with practiced ease, years of hauling gear making the weight laughable. He set it on his porch, heart still thudding. But he knew this wasn't over. That night the first prank came. Daniel was in his garage, unpacking the bar set, when a shrill pounding rattled his door. He opened it to find a police cruiser idling at the curb and 2 officers standing stiffly. "Sir," one began, "we received a call about a disturbance." "Something about stolen property?" Daniel pinched the bridge of his nose. He didn't need to ask who called. "Officers, I'm the property owner. This package was delivered to me. My neighbor across the street, Karen, decided to move it without consent. I have tracking confirmation right here." He showed them the app, scrolling to the signed delivery receipt. The older officer studied it, nodded once, and sighed. "We figured it might be something like that. Sorry to bother you, sir." The younger officer added, almost apologetically, "She calls a lot. We know her." When the cruiser pulled away, Daniel leaned against the doorframe and laughed until his stomach hurt. This was ridiculous. He'd dealt with insurgent networks, corrupt warlords, and entire villages turning against him overnight, but a middle-aged suburbanite with too much free time? That was his new battlefield. Still, laughter gave way to resolve. Karen had crossed a line. And in his world, lines mattered. Every action had consequences. If she wanted to play this as a war of attrition, she'd discover just how stubborn a soldier could be. The next morning, Daniel made his first move. He mounted a pair of discreet security cameras. One on his porch, another angled across the yard to capture the street. Not military grade, but good enough to record anyone sniffing around his property. As he tightened the last screw, his phone buzzed with a notification. Motion detected. He pulled up the live feed just in time to see Karen standing at the edge of his lawn, hands on hips, glaring like he'd committed treason. "Morning," he called lightly. "Want to wave for the camera?" Her jaw dropped. Then she stormed back across the street, muttering something about violations and consent forms. Daniel chuckled. He knew enough about tactical psychology to recognize when someone was rattled. Karen wasn't used to being challenged. And in his experience, people like her escalated before they quit. Sure enough, that afternoon he found his mailbox stuffed with HOA violation slips, grass too long, trash bins visible, unauthorized equipment, the gym set visible through the garage. He flipped through them like playing cards, amused more than angry. But when he reached the last slip, his amusement hardened into focus. Suspicion of contraband deliveries. Investigation pending. Contraband? Daniel clenched his jaw. He'd seen the word used in combat zones to justify raids, seizures, even arrests. To see it scribbled in HOA ink was almost laughable, but also dangerous. If she really believed, or claimed, he was importing illegal goods, she could stir up more than just nuisance calls. He sat on his porch that evening, watching the sun bleed over the rooftops, and thought carefully. Every mission he'd ever led began with intel. You didn't move blind. So he decided if Karen wanted to play investigator, so would he. Only his methods would be sharper, cleaner, and entirely by the book. Later that night, as he reviewed his camera feeds, Daniel spotted something that made his pulse quicken. A shadow flitted across the frame at 11:43 p.m., someone creeping along his driveway. The figure bent near his stoop, reached for something, then froze as a porch light clicked on across the street. Karen. Even in the grainy footage, her posture was unmistakable. She slunk back to her side of the street, robe flapping in the night breeze. Daniel leaned back, a slow grin spreading. She wasn't just nosy. She was actively tampering with his property. That was evidence. And as any soldier knew, evidence could win wars before the first shot was fired. By the time dawn broke, he had a plan. The package war had only just begun. Daniel Briggs had learned something long ago during his years in the army. Never rush your counterattack. Timing wasn't just a matter of minutes, it was about patience, about waiting until the enemy thought they'd won before you struck back. That's when their guard dropped, when overconfidence made them sloppy. And HOA Karen? She was nothing if not sloppy when she felt untouchable. The morning after discovering Karen rifling through his packages, Daniel made coffee, sat at the small pine table in his kitchen, and spread out a notepad. He wrote like he was back in the field, bulleted points, tactical notes, contingencies. He wasn't going to war, not exactly, but the mindset carried over. Every mission had an objective, and his here was simple. Expose Karen, reclaim his stolen goods, and send a message so clear that even Karen's self-inflated ego couldn't misinterpret it. Objective 1. Track the thefts. He scribbled under it, document evidence. Camera angles. Time logs. No direct confrontation until proof is airtight. Objective 2. Assess allies. He listed delivery drivers, neighbors, local PD. He knew the police wouldn't be thrilled about HOA drama. Cops usually dreaded calls about community squabbles, but if Karen was committing theft, there was jurisdiction. And neighbors? He'd seen enough weary looks during HOA meetings to know he wasn't the only one sick of her antics. Maybe it was time someone rallied them. Objective 3. Control the battlefield. That one made him chuckle. The battlefield is a cul-de-sac, he muttered into his coffee, but the principle was the same. Whoever shaped the environment won. By mid-morning, Daniel was outside, casually mowing his lawn, which conveniently put him in position to observe Karen. She was predictable. The second she heard the rumble of the UPS truck down the street, she emerged from her front porch like a vulture spotting carrion. Sunglasses on, phone in hand, faux casual stroll down the driveway. The driver would hop out, leave the package, and before the taillights disappeared, Karen's painted nails would already be clutching cardboard that didn't belong to her. But this time Daniel was ready. His GoPro, disguised inside a birdhouse he'd mounted on his mailbox the night before, caught the whole thing. High-definition video. Karen's greedy smirk, her sidelong glance toward his house, the swift snatch of the box, and her disappearing act back through her front door. Daniel powered down the mower, satisfaction bubbling beneath his calm exterior. Got you. That night he called in an old favor. Sergeant Mark Doyle, now a deputy with the county sheriff's office, picked up on the second ring. Briggs? Damn man, thought you fell off the grid. Been keeping low. Listen Mark, I've got a situation. HOA type. Package theft. Mark groaned. You know how many times a week we get calls about porch pirates? And 9 times out of 10, it's some neighbor drama blown way out of proportion. That's why I'm calling you, Daniel replied evenly. I don't deal in drama. I deal in facts. And I've got Karen Rodriguez on camera stealing 3 deliveries in 2 days. There was a pause, then Mark's voice sharpened. You serious? Dead serious. And if she's doing it to me, chances are I'm not the only target. What do you say, want to help me crack a suburban crime ring? Mark snorted. Only you could make package theft sound like a black ops mission. Send me the footage. I'll run it by the captain. Can't promise an arrest without a statement from multiple victims, but if you rally your neighbors, we can move faster. Already working on that. The next step was the hardest, convincing the neighbors to speak up. Many of them were too intimidated by Karen's dominance on the HOA board to take a stand. Daniel knew fear when he saw it, the subtle ways people avoided eye contact, the forced politeness at meetings. But soldiers didn't just win battles alone, they inspired others to step up. That weekend he knocked on doors. Mrs. Chong across the street was the first. She was hesitant, wringing her hands in the doorway. I don't want trouble, Mr. Briggs. Karen, she makes things very difficult if you disagree with her. Daniel nodded. I understand. She thrives on fear. But I have proof she's stealing. Packages, maybe even yours. You deserve better than to tiptoe around someone who acts like she owns the neighborhood. Mrs. Chong bit her lip, then finally whispered, Last month my grandson sent me a tablet. It never arrived. The delivery company swore it was dropped off. Would you give a statement? She hesitated again, then nodded slowly. If others will too. One by one he gathered stories. The Ortiz family had lost a box of baby clothes. Mr. Jenkins, the retired Navy machinist, swore someone took a set of power tools off his porch. All unreported, all swept under the rug to avoid Karen's wrath. By Sunday evening, Daniel had 5 willing neighbors and a folder full of testimonies. Combined with his video, it was more than enough. But Karen wasn't stupid. She could sense when the tide shifted, when whispers spread on the block. Monday morning, she stormed across Daniel's lawn in yoga pants and fury, pounding on his door like a battering ram. You think you're clever, don't you? She snapped the moment he opened it. Daniel leaned against the frame, arms crossed, calm as ever. Clever? No. Prepared? Yes. Her eyes narrowed. You've been spying on me? Recording me? That's illegal, you know. Not from my own property. Her jaw clenched. Listen here, soldier boy. This neighborhood has rules. And if you think you can turn people against me, you're dead wrong. The HOA is mine and I will bury you in fines before you can blink. Daniel's expression never changed. Funny thing about rules, Karen, they apply to everyone. Including you. Stealing packages isn't an HOA matter. It's theft. And theft carries consequences. She faltered, just for a fraction of a second, before masking it with another sneer. You'll regret this. With that, she spun on her heel and stormed back across his lawn, not realizing Daniel had been recording the entire exchange on his phone. That night, Daniel filed everything with Mark. Video evidence, neighbor testimonies, and even Karen's thinly veiled threat. Mark whistled low as he flipped through the folder. Briggs, this is solid. I can push for a warrant. But I'll warn you now, people like Karen, they don't go down easy. She's got a reputation, probably connections. The board might try to shield her. You ready for blowback? Daniel smirked. I've been shot at, ambushed, and dropped into worse holes than this cul-de-sac. If Karen wants to fight dirty, I'll still outlast her. What Daniel didn't anticipate was Karen escalating faster than expected. The very next day, 3 HOA board members showed up at his doorstep, clipboards in hand, smugness radiating from their pressed polo shirts. Mr. Briggs, the tallest one began, we've received multiple complaints about unauthorized surveillance equipment on your property. Birdhouse cameras violate HOA aesthetics. You'll need to remove it immediately or face a $500 fine. Daniel almost laughed. Karen was pulling strings already, turning the board into her private shield. But instead of losing his temper, he invited them in, offered them coffee and set his laptop on the table. One click and the footage played. Karen snatching boxes one after another. The board members shifted uncomfortably, exchanging nervous glances. "You want me to remove the camera?" Daniel asked mildly. "Fine. But just know this video goes straight to the county sheriff. I'm sure he'll be curious why the HOA is trying so hard to bury it." The board members didn't finish their coffee. By midweek, the neighborhood buzzed like a live wire. Some residents whispered their support for Daniel, grateful someone was finally standing up. Others, loyal to Karen or simply too scared, avoided him altogether. And Karen? She doubled down, snide comments in the newsletter, veiled threats about yard inspections, even a rumor that Daniel had military PTSD outbursts and was a danger to the community. Daniel recognized the tactic instantly. Smear the opponent. Undermine credibility. Classic play. But she'd underestimated one thing. Soldiers knew how to play the long game. That Friday evening, as the sun dipped low and porch lights flicked on across the cul-de-sac, Daniel sat on his front steps, sipping a beer. He watched Karen pacing her driveway, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing wildly. Desperation was setting in. She knew her empire of control was cracking, and she was lashing out like a cornered animal. Daniel didn't grin or gloat. He just murmured to himself, Phase 1 complete. Because if Karen thought package theft was her only mistake, she hadn't yet realized the soldier across the street was 3 steps ahead. The next morning dawned with that deceptive calm that always comes before the storm. For civilians, it was just another weekday, sprinklers hissing, dogs barking at mail trucks, joggers looping around cul-de-sacs in neon shorts. But for Staff Sergeant Marcus Hale, this was reconnaissance day. He'd spent the night replaying his decision. After confirming Karen had swiped his packages with her smug grin and nosy flashlight, he couldn't just file a complaint. In the Army, filing reports was sometimes necessary, but out here, in this quiet suburban battlefield, the truth was only as strong as the evidence you could hold in your hands. And Marcus wasn't about to lose to a Karen armed with gossip and lies. He pulled a battered Pelican case from his garage. Inside, gear that wasn't exactly Army standard issue anymore, but had traveled with him through Afghanistan and Iraq. A thermal monocular, a mini-drone with a silent rotor system, and his favorite tool of all, a camouflage trail camera with motion detection, the kind hunters used for tracking deer. As he laid the gear out on the hood of his truck, Marcus chuckled. "This is ridiculous. I fought insurgents with less prep than I'm giving this woman." But that was the truth. Karen wasn't just some nosy neighbor now. She was an opponent who understood the HOA rules like an enemy understood terrain. She used them like weapons, and Marcus knew underestimating an enemy was the quickest way to lose. The recon begins. Marcus started simple. He walked to his porch and repositioned a decoy package, an empty Amazon box taped shut and weighted with some bricks. Then, from the shadow of his garage, he launched the drone. It rose silently above the cul-de-sac, blending against the morning sky. Through his tablet screen, Marcus got a bird's-eye view. Karen in her yard, watering her already perfect tulips, her nose twitching as she scanned for any excuse to lecture someone. A few doors down, a teenager skateboarded lazily, earbuds in, oblivious to the war of wills brewing on the block. Then Karen spotted the box. Marcus zoomed in with the drone's camera, grinning as she stiffened like a meerkat. She stared, pretending to water the flowers, then pretended harder not to stare. Marcus knew that look. It was the same one Afghan insurgents wore when they thought no one noticed them eyeing a convoy. She put her hose down, muttered something to herself, and strutted across the lawn. Marcus whispered to himself, "Hook, line, and sinker." Karen checked both ways as though she was crossing a highway, then leaned down, pretending to tidy his porch. In seconds, the decoy box was tucked under her arm. Marcus hit record. From 3 angles, the drone above, the trail cam at the corner of the porch, and his phone in hand, he captured her crime in 4K clarity. The confrontation. Now Marcus could have waited. Could have let her stash it, built a bigger case. But soldiers didn't always wait. They picked the moment and struck. He walked out calmly, hands in pockets. "Morning, Karen. What you got there?" She froze mid-step, the box halfway tucked against her floral blouse. Her smile was wide, fake, and cracked at the edges. "Oh, Marcus, I was just securing this for you. You know, with porch pirates and all, terrible problem these days." Marcus tilted his head. "Porch pirates? In this cul-de-sac?" Karen laughed nervously. "Well, you can't be too careful. I was going to keep it safe inside my house until you got back." Marcus held up his phone, screen glowing with the live drone feed. It showed her lifting the package off his porch like she was in a training video for thieves. "Funny thing, Karen. My new security system doesn't lie. Her jaw clenched. For a split second, the mask dropped and her eyes flashed pure venom. Then she plastered the smile back on. I don't appreciate being spied on. This is harassment. Marcus took a slow step closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. Karen, I've dealt with real thieves before. You think the HOA will back you when I show them this? Or the cops? She hissed like a cornered cat. You wouldn't dare. Oh, I would. But I'm giving you a choice. Put the box back. Walk away. Stop touching my property. For a moment, Marcus almost expected her to comply. But Karen was a different breed of stubborn. Instead, she clutched the box tighter. You soldiers think you're above everyone. You think your little rules and gadgets make you special. Well, in this neighborhood I make the rules. And the board listens to me. She stormed back to her house, the box still in her grip, slamming her door like a declaration of war. Marcus stood there, adrenaline buzzing. He had her on video, but she wasn't retreating, she was regrouping. Fallout. By evening, the HOA had already called him. Mr. Hale, the chairman said on the phone, his voice oily with fake politeness. We've had reports of you flying drones over private property. That's a violation of community rules. Marcus almost laughed. You mean reports from Karen? I can't disclose who filed the complaint, the chairman said stiffly. But if this behavior continues, we may issue a fine. So that was her game: flip the script, strike first, control the narrative. In the army, insurgents did the same thing, spread propaganda before you could present the truth. And once the story was out, it was hard to undo. Marcus hung up and leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. He had evidence, but Karen had influence. This was no longer about a stolen box, it was about power. The soldier's choice. That night, Marcus sat on his porch with a cold beer, watching the quiet street. He thought of choices. In combat, every decision mattered. Wait too long and a convoy got hit. Too soon and you risked civilian lives. Here his choices mattered too. He could take the video straight to the police and escalate things, risking the HOA turning fully against him. Or he could play the long game, bait Karen into exposing herself even worse, and use her own arrogance to bring her down. The soldier in him wanted to strike fast. The strategist in him knew patience won wars. He sipped his beer, then smirked. All right, Karen. You want to play games? Let's see how you handle a real operation. And with that, he began planning Operation Package Trap. Because if Karen thought stealing one box was a victory, she had no idea the storm she just unleashed. By the time the weekend sun broke through the thin morning haze, Sergeant Mason Cross had already decided that enough was enough. He had endured combat tours where insurgents planted IEDs under the very dirt he walked on, where every shadow was a potential sniper nest. Yet here, in the quiet suburbs of his hometown, the greatest thorn in his side was a middle-aged woman with a clipboard, binoculars, and an insatiable appetite for his mail. HOA Karen had turned petty interference into a tactical art form, and Mason was determined to counter it with precision only a soldier could muster. The previous night, after Karen had been caught brazenly stuffing his Amazon box under her cardigan like a squirrel hoarding nuts, Mason had lain awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling fan. Anger wasn't the only thing driving him now. Curiosity had crept in. Why was she doing it? Was it power? Spite? Or something more pathetic like the thrill of playing neighborhood sheriff? Whatever the reason, it had escalated. She wasn't just nosy anymore, she was a thief. And in Mason's world, theft wasn't a minor inconvenience. It was a violation of trust, of security, of the unwritten code between people who live side by side. By 0600, Mason had transformed his living room into a miniature operations center. His coffee table was spread with a neighborhood map, drone batteries charging on the floor, and his laptop open to a live security feed from the 4 motion-activated cameras he'd mounted overnight. Operation Porch Trap, he muttered, half amused by the ridiculousness of naming a suburban sting operation, half deadly serious about its execution. Step 1: Reconnaissance. He flew the drone just after sunrise, sweeping it quietly over the cul-de-sac. Karen's house looked deceptively normal. Manicured hedges, hanging flower baskets, wind chimes clinking softly. But Mason noticed her curtains twitch when the drone buzzed overhead. She was awake. Watching. Always watching. Step 2: Bait. Mason had prepared 3 decoy packages. One was a plain brown box weighted with bricks. Another was an Amazon box, taped just enough to hold but designed to burst open dramatically if dropped. Inside were empty water bottles and a note that read, "Smile, you're on camera, Karen." The third, his masterpiece, contained nothing but glitter, finely ground, neon-colored, the kind that embeds in carpet and never truly disappears. He chuckled darkly. "You want a package, Karen? I'll give you a package." By mid-morning, Mason set the bait on his porch in plain sight. Then he retreated into his living room, adjusted the camera angles and waited. Waiting was something the army had taught him well. He could wait in scorching heat, freezing cold, or deafening silence. Compared to patrols that lasted days, a suburban stakeout was child's play. At 1,000 hours, movement flickered on his monitor. A figure in a wide-brimmed sun hat and oversized sunglasses emerged from Karen's driveway, pretending to trim her roses. Mason narrowed his eyes. Even in disguise, her posture gave her away, stiff, self-important, as if she were on parade. She drifted closer to his porch, scissors in hand, snipping at invisible weeds along the sidewalk. Then, as if the universe itself had cued her, she made a beeline for the first box. "Gotcha," Mason whispered, hitting the record button. Karen bent down, scooped up the Amazon decoy, and with a practiced glance over her shoulder, began hustling back toward her house. But halfway up her driveway, the box split open. Plastic bottles clattered across the pavement like gunfire. Karen froze, face blanching, then dropped the entire mess and bolted inside. Mason laughed so hard he nearly spilled his coffee. The sight of the self-anointed queen of the HOA sprinting with her sun hat flapping was worth every second of preparation. But this was only round one. That afternoon, Karen regrouped. He saw her pacing near her mailbox, phone glued to her ear. He imagined her calling the HOA board, the police, maybe even her book club, spinning tales of suspicious packages and safety concerns. Mason leaned back, arms crossed, amused at how predictable her escalation was. The second bait package, the glitter bomb, still waited on his porch like a landmine. Around 1,500 hours she struck again. This time no disguises. Karen marched over in broad daylight, righteous fury radiating from her posture. She snatched the glitter box, muttering to herself, and stormed toward her house. The cameras caught the exact moment she tore it open inside her entryway. A rainbow cloud erupted, sparkling across her living room like a 4th of July firework. Mason replayed the footage twice, grinning as Karen flailed, coughing, swiping at her face. Glitter clung to her hair, her sweater, her furniture. She looked like a disco ball that had survived a hurricane. Mason exhaled, satisfied. "That's for the protein powder, lady." But victory came with consequences. By evening, Mason's phone buzzed with an official-looking email from the HOA. Subject: Urgent HOA violation notice. Body: Homeowner Mason Cross. It has come to our attention that suspicious and hazardous items have been left unattended on your property. These packages pose a risk to the community. Immediate compliance is required. Failure to remove said items may result in fines or legal escalation. Mason scoffed. Hazardous items? You mean your president's sticky fingers? Still, the email rattled him. Karen wasn't just stealing, she was flipping the narrative, painting herself as the victim. That was dangerous. In war, Mason had learned that perception could be as lethal as bullets. If enough neighbors believed Karen, he'd become the villain in his own story. That night, Mason sat on his porch, a beer in hand, the cool breeze carrying faint scents of barbecue from a house down the street. He thought about the choices ahead. He could escalate further, set up more traps, call the police, even confront her directly with the video evidence. But each option carried risks. Police involvement could drag his own name through mud. Confrontation might spiral into chaos. And escalation was a road he knew too well. In combat, it led to firefights, to casualties. Did he really want his suburban peace turning into another battlefield? A voice broke his thoughts. Rough night? It was his neighbor, Elena, carrying a basket of laundry. She lived 2 doors down, a single mom with a sharp wit and a patience for Mason's gruffness that most people lacked. You could say that, Mason replied, forcing a smile. You know she's going to keep coming, right? Elena said, setting the basket on her hip. Karen doesn't stop until she feels like she's won. Mason sighed. Then maybe it's time I remind her what losing feels like. Elena raised an eyebrow. Don't go full Rambo on her. This is still a neighborhood, not Fallujah. Her words hit harder than he expected. He wasn't in uniform anymore. He wasn't in a war zone. Yet here he was, plotting tactical ops against a middle-aged woman. Was he slipping back into habits he thought he'd left behind? Still, Mason knew one thing. If he didn't push back, Karen would only tighten her grip. And soldiers didn't win by sitting on their hands. Step 3. Exposure. The next morning, Mason uploaded the glitter explosion footage to a private drive. Then he printed a still frame, Karen mid-sneeze, covered head to toe in neon sparkles. He tacked it to his fridge, a reminder of both his small victory and the unfinished war. He wouldn't release it, yet. Timing was everything. Instead, he drafted a message to the HOA board. Dear HOA Committee, I have clear evidence of ongoing theft from my property by your president, Karen Simmons. If this matter is not addressed internally, I will have no choice but to pursue legal remedies. For now, consider this your opportunity to handle things discreetly. Sergeant Mason Cross, U.S. Army, Ret. His finger hovered over the send button. Sending it meant escalation. It meant declaring open war. But holding back meant letting Karen think she was untouchable. He hit send. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky orange, Mason heard a sharp knock at his door. He opened it to find 3 HOA board members standing stiffly on his porch, their expressions caught between embarrassment and fear. Behind them, Karen lurked, still faintly sparkling under the porch light. Mason, the tallest board member began, clearing his throat. We need to discuss some allegations. Mason crossed his arms, jaw tightening. Good. So do I. For a moment, silence stretched like a drawn bowstring. Karen's glare burned hotter than the desert sun, but Mason didn't flinch. This was it, the pivot point, the decision that would define the battle ahead. And Mason, soldier to the bone, knew one truth above all: retreat wasn't an option. The following morning began with the kind of stillness that only pretends to be calm. The cul-de-sac looked perfectly ordinary, trimmed hedges, cars neatly parked, and birds hopping along the wires. But Marcus, standing on his porch with a mug of black coffee, knew it was a fragile calm. Karen had stirred something ugly in the neighborhood, and what had been petty interference now threatened to spiral into a dangerous feud. He traced the rim of his mug, eyes narrowing at the sight of Karen's driveway. Her SUV was already gone. That could mean one of two things. Either she was at the HOA office brewing more nonsense about him, or she was out on one of her self-appointed surveillance runs. Either way, he had little time to prepare. The soldier in him switched on, methodical and precise. He'd learned the hard way that when an enemy escalates, you can't meet them with panic. You counter with strategy. The delivery sting. The idea came to him over toast and scrambled eggs. If Karen wanted to keep stealing his packages, then fine, he would give her packages worth stealing. Decoys. Traps. Not cruel ones, but enough to expose her once and for all. Marcus pulled out his laptop and opened an old military supply website he still had bookmarked. They sold harmless training gear, empty crates, even mock equipment used for drills. After a few clicks, he ordered a stack of empty but official-looking boxes, each stamped with "Property of U.S. Army, handle with care." He couldn't help but grin. If Karen thought she was clever sneaking Amazon boxes off his porch, how would she react when she lugged one of these into her garage? Curiosity would chew at her. And once she opened it, she'd find nothing but air and maybe a note waiting inside. Still, Marcus knew evidence was stronger than games. He didn't just want to scare Karen, he wanted proof. He dug out 2 motion sensor cameras from his garage, remnants of his home security upgrade, and mounted one in a birdhouse overlooking his porch. The other he slipped into a potted plant near the front door. Hidden, discreet but precise. The soldiers' counteroffensive was underway. A neighbor in the shadows. That afternoon, while adjusting the birdhouse camera, Marcus heard a soft cough behind him. He turned to see Mrs. Alvarez, the elderly widow who lived 2 houses down, standing at the edge of his driveway. "Morning, ma'am," Marcus said, lowering his tools. "Need something?" She hesitated before stepping closer. Her voice was low, almost conspiratorial. "I saw her, Karen. She was in your yard last night near the porch." Marcus stiffened. "You're certain?" Mrs. Alvarez nodded. "I couldn't sleep. I saw her from my upstairs window. She had something shiny in her hand like a tool. She fiddled near your lock before walking away." The words hit him like a cold slap. Karen wasn't just stealing packages anymore. She was probing his house. Testing his security. That wasn't pettiness, that was intrusion, a potential crime. "Thank you," Marcus said carefully. "If you're willing, could you write that down for me? Just in case." The old woman smiled faintly. "For you, soldier? Of course. You've always looked out for this street. About time someone looked out for you." Her words stuck with him. He had allies here, silent ones. Not everyone was blinded by Karen's gossip. The escalation. That night, Marcus left one of the dummy army crates on his porch, neatly taped, perfectly inviting. Then he dimmed his lights and waited in the living room, coffee replaced by water to keep his nerves sharp. Hours ticked by. The neighborhood grew quiet, the only sound the chirp of crickets and the occasional hum of a car in the distance. Midnight passed. Then, movement. The faint crunch of gravel reached his ears. Through the curtains, Marcus caught a shadow creeping along his walkway. Small frame. Quick steps. A glint of blonde hair under the porch light. Karen. His jaw tightened as he watched her crouch, lift the box and awkwardly shuffle it against her chest. The camera's light blinked once, capturing everything. Marcus stayed still, hands balled into fists, fighting the soldier's instinct to confront her immediately. Not yet. Not until he had enough rope for her to hang herself with. She disappeared into the night, her SUV's hatch slamming shut moments later. Marcus exhaled slowly. Phase 1, complete. Fallout in the HOA. The next day Karen struck first. Marcus hadn't even finished his morning run before his phone buzzed with an email, an official notice from the HOA board. The subject line read, "Immediate violation notice, unauthorized military property." He nearly laughed at the absurdity, but the anger burned hotter. She had wasted no time turning his decoy against him, claiming he was stockpiling military contraband in a civilian neighborhood. The notice demanded he appear at a board meeting within 48 hours. Karen wasn't just stealing. She was manipulating the HOA into becoming her weapon. Marcus wiped sweat from his brow and thought carefully. He could storm into that meeting, slam his evidence down and watch Karen squirm. But the soldier in him knew timing was everything. You don't rush an ambush, you let the target walk right into it. He replied politely, confirming his attendance. Then he pulled the footage from his cameras, carefully labeling every frame with timestamps. Confrontation at the store. Later that afternoon, Marcus went into town to grab groceries. Halfway down the frozen foods aisle, he heard the unmistakable click of heels behind him. "Well, if it isn't Sergeant Marcus," Karen's voice drawled, loud enough for other shoppers to glance their way. "Out shopping for more classified packages?" Marcus kept his expression flat, but his eyes locked on hers with quiet steel. "Good afternoon, Karen. Hope you're enjoying that box you stole last night." Her smirk faltered. Just for a fraction of a second. Then she recovered, lips curling. "Excuse me? I don't know what you're implying, but slander is a serious matter." "Not as serious as theft," Marcus replied evenly. "Or trespassing. Or filing false reports with the HOA. But don't worry, I've got patience. And I've got proof." Karen's nostrils flared. She leaned closer, whispering fiercely. "You think anyone will believe you over me? I've run this neighborhood for 10 years. You're just a soldier playing house. People listen to me." Marcus leaned in just as close, his voice calm as a blade being unsheathed. "Then you'd better hope the cameras I set up last night are broken. Because if they're not, you'll find out very soon who people are really listening to." He didn't wait for her response. He pushed his cart past her, leaving Karen frozen in the aisle, the mask of control cracking. A soldier's reflection. That night, Marcus sat on his porch, staring at the stars. He thought about Afghanistan, about nights he'd spent on rooftops with only the moon for company. Back then the enemy had been clear. Here the lines blurred. A suburban tyrant masquerading as a concerned neighbor. A homeowner's board that mistook noise for truth. He took a long breath. The army had taught him something beyond tactics and weapons. It had taught him resilience. Fights weren't just about winning. They were about protecting what mattered. Karen wasn't just targeting him. She was poisoning the entire neighborhood, turning good people against each other. And if he didn't stand firm, she'd keep going unchecked. Marcus clenched his fist. "Not this time," he muttered to himself. The mystery twist. At dawn, as he was checking his cameras again, Marcus noticed something odd. One of the recordings showed not just Karen, but another figure. A taller, broader man lingering by her SUV as she loaded the stolen box. The man wasn't from their cul-de-sac. His face was partially obscured by a hoodie, but his movements were deliberate, practiced. Karen hadn't acted alone. Marcus replayed the footage 3 times, each time feeling the knot in his stomach tighten. This wasn't just nosy Karen stealing out of spite. Someone else was involved, someone who moved like they'd done this before. And suddenly the soldier realized, this battle wasn't going to end with Karen. She was just the opening act. By Monday morning, the entire neighborhood was buzzing like a kicked hornet's nest. The soldier, Daniel, could feel it in the air before he even stepped outside. Curtains twitched, whispers carried across driveways, and HOA Karen strutted around with the smugness of someone who thought she had already won. What she didn't realize was that Daniel had spent the entire weekend setting up what amounted to a battlefield, not with rifles and sandbags, but with cameras, pressure sensors, and one very special decoy box that looked like the jackpot to anyone with sticky fingers. Karen had escalated by claiming Daniel was harassing her with fake deliveries. The HOA board had even slipped a notice under his door, threatening fines if he didn't cease disruptive behavior. Daniel laughed bitterly when he read it. He'd seen insurgent leaders use the same tactic overseas: flip the narrative, make the victim the aggressor, and confuse everyone in the middle. This time, though, Daniel wasn't just playing defense. He was setting the terms of engagement. That morning, a big, ordinary brown package sat on Daniel's porch. Inside was nothing dangerous, just sandbags and some harmless dye packs. But wired into the seams were tiny sensors that would transmit instantly to his phone if the box was moved. Cameras hidden in a flower pot and in the gutter above were synced with his tablet inside. He'd set the stage like a sniper prepping a kill zone: cover every angle, anticipate every move, leave nothing to chance. As he sat at his kitchen table sipping bitter army-strong coffee, Daniel thought back to one of his old instructors, a grizzled ranger with a crooked smile. You can't stop someone from making a stupid move, but you can make sure they pay for it in front of everyone. Daniel didn't want revenge for its own sake. What he wanted was the truth to hit daylight, undeniable and raw. Karen wasn't just stealing packages, she was abusing authority, twisting the HOA, and dragging his name through the mud. He'd fought too hard overseas to let some neighborhood tyrant walk all over him here. Around mid-morning, the trap sprang. Daniel's phone buzzed with an alert. Motion sensor triggered. Porch cam live. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. There she was. Karen, sunglasses on, wide-brimmed hat, moving with the clumsy stealth of someone who thought they were invisible but looked more like a raccoon rummaging through trash. She bent down, glanced left and right, then grabbed the box. The moment she lifted it, the dye packs went off with a whoosh. A bright cloud of neon blue powder exploding into the air. It coated her hands, her face, even her clothes. She yelped, stumbling back like she'd been hit with a flashbang. Daniel couldn't help it. He laughed so hard he nearly spilled his coffee. Karen's shriek carried across the cul-de-sac. Neighbors peeked out their doors. Some gasped, some chuckled. And all the while, Daniel's cameras recorded every second. Karen dropped the box like it had bitten her, but the damage was done. Her hands were bright blue, and no amount of wiping on her shirt helped. Worse, when she staggered back toward her house, the sprinklers Daniel had set on a timer hissed to life, drenching her in cold water and spreading the dye even more. "Daniel," she screeched, pointing a stained finger across the street. "You're going to jail for this." Daniel calmly walked onto his porch, phone in one hand, mug in the other. "Funny thing, Karen," he said loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "This camera says otherwise." He turned the screen toward her. There she was, in crystal clear HD, stealing his package. The murmurs of the watching neighbors grew louder. One man even muttered, "She's been doing it all along?" Karen froze, the confidence draining from her face. Then, as if remembering her script, she stomped her foot and screamed, "That's entrapment. You can't just leave things out to trick me." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You mean, on my own porch?" That earned a few laughs from the onlookers. Within an hour, Karen had called the police. 2 patrol cars rolled into the neighborhood, lights flashing. Daniel had already transferred the footage to multiple drives, anticipating her every accusation. Sure enough, Karen launched into a dramatic performance worthy of a soap opera. She claimed Daniel had booby-trapped his porch, that he was targeting her personally, that he had even militarized the street against her. The officers listened politely, but their expressions hardened when Daniel calmly showed them the video. They watched as Karen strutted up, stole the package and got herself covered in dye. One officer even chuckled. "Ma'am, this looks pretty clear." Karen's face twisted. "He's manipulating it. He's dangerous. Look at his background. He's a soldier. He probably has weapons in his house." That was the line that did it. Daniel's jaw clenched. His voice dropped, low and steady the way it did when he meant business. "Yes, I'm a soldier. I've spent years overseas protecting this country so people like you could live comfortably. And I'll tell you this, I've never once stolen from the people I swore to protect. Can you say the same?" The silence that followed was deafening. The officer stepped aside to make a few calls, leaving Karen fuming on the curb, still dyed blue like a cartoon villain. Some neighbors were filming her with their phones now, whispering about calling the HOA meeting early. Daniel knew this battle wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to admit defeat. She'd double down, twist the narrative again, maybe even claim she was framed. But this time the evidence wasn't just in his hands, it was in the hands of half the block. And yet, as Daniel stood on his porch, feeling the weight of eyes on him, he realized the fight had shifted into something larger. This wasn't just about packages anymore. It was about control, about power, about whether one loud, manipulative voice could keep a community under her thumb. Daniel had fought insurgents who believed control came from fear. He'd dismantled networks built on lies and intimidation. He was starting to see Karen in the same light, which meant he had to treat this like a campaign. This wasn't over, it was just the end of the first operation. And Karen had no idea what kind of enemy she had just made. The video of Karen turning smuff blue hit the neighborhood like a mortar round. Within 24 hours, it had bounced across group chats, Facebook pages, and even made its way into a local Reddit thread titled, HOA Queen Busted Stealing Packages. By Tuesday evening, Karen's kingdom of fear was crumbling. Neighbors who had once kept their heads down were suddenly emboldened. Some whispered thank yous to Daniel as they passed his driveway. Others began digging out their own grievances, receipts of fines, ridiculous notices, and even photos of Karen herself snooping near their porches. For years, Karen had ruled by intimidation, but fear evaporates fast when truth shines on it. Still, Daniel knew cornered enemies lash out the hardest. And sure enough, Karen called an emergency HOA meeting, demanding mandatory attendance. The email she blasted out to the community dripped with venom. Recent incidents have endangered the safety and harmony of our neighborhood. A resident has engaged in harassment, illegal surveillance, and dangerous traps. All members must attend this meeting, where disciplinary actions will be considered. Daniel chuckled darkly when he read it. So this is her counterattack. She's trying to make me the villain. He'd been here before, not in a suburban clubhouse, but in dusty villages overseas, watching corrupt local leaders whip up mobs against whichever soldier or villager dared expose them. It always followed the same pattern: discredit the witness, flip the narrative, tighten their grip. But Karen had underestimated him. He wasn't walking into that meeting as a lone target. He was walking in with evidence, allies, and the iron calm of a man who had faced far worse than a hostile homeowners committee. The clubhouse smelled of stale coffee and cheap carpet cleaner. Folding chairs filled the space, neighbors fanning themselves with HOA newsletters while Karen paced at the front like a general rallying her troops. Her blue-stained skin had mostly faded after repeated scrubbing, but a faint tint still clung to her fingernails. Daniel thought it poetic. No amount of scrubbing could wash away what she'd done. Karen slammed a gavel on the plastic folding table. "This meeting will come to order," she barked, voice sharp. "We have urgent matters to address. One of our residents has crossed the line into dangerous, destabilizing behavior. We must decide tonight how to protect our community." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded. Others shifted uneasily. Karen's gaze swept the room, then zeroed in on Daniel. "Mr. Daniel Hayes," she sneered. "Would you like to explain why you're surveilling your neighbors, setting off chemical traps, and harassing the leadership of this association?" All eyes turned toward him. Daniel rose slowly, shoulders squared, posture unconsciously military. His voice was steady, calm, but carried the weight of command. "First off, I didn't set any traps. What I did was place a package on my porch. A porch where, legally, I have every right to receive deliveries without interference. What happened next was not my doing, it was hers." He held up his tablet and tapped the screen. The projector hummed to life. On the wall behind him, the footage played. Karen sneaking up, snatching the box, getting hit with the dye pack. The room erupted, gasps, whispers, even stifled laughter. Karen shot to her feet. "That video is doctored. He's manipulating you." Daniel didn't flinch. He tapped again, pulling up a second angle from the gutter cam. Then a third from the flower pot. Then 2 clips neighbors had sent him of Karen snooping near their porches. The narrative shifted visibly in the room. Arms crossed. Heads nodded. Karen's allies shrank in their seats. Daniel's voice cut through the noise. "I fought overseas to protect communities from people who think power gives them the right to take whatever they want. And I'll be damned if I let that happen here in my own neighborhood." Karen's mask cracked. Her voice rose, shrill with desperation. "You're dangerous. You're bringing military intimidation into a peaceful suburb. Look at him, he's threatening me right now." But no one was buying it anymore. One neighbor, a retired teacher named Mrs. Callahan, stood up and spoke. "Karen, I've had 3 packages go missing this year. And when I saw that video, I knew why. You fined us, bullied us, and now this? Enough." Another neighbor chimed in. "She threatened me with a lien because my garage light was out for one night. One night. Voices rose, a chorus of pent-up frustration spilling out. Years of resentment finally finding air. Karen banged the gavel, but the sound was swallowed by the crowd. She shouted, "This meeting is out of order. You're all being manipulated by him. He's dangerous. He's—" Daniel cut her off, his tone sharp as a knife. "The only danger here is you, Karen. And everyone in this room knows it." The board members, usually meek shadows under Karen's thumb, exchanged nervous glances. Finally, one cleared his throat. "Given recent revelations, I move that we suspend Karen's authority pending a full review." The room cheered. A second board member quickly seconded the motion. Karen's face turned crimson. "You can't do this to me. I am this HO." "No," Daniel said, locking eyes with her. "You're not anymore." The vote was swift. Hands shot up around the room, overwhelmingly in favor of stripping Karen of her power. The gavel that she had wielded like a weapon was quietly taken from her and set aside. Karen's shriek echoed off the clubhouse walls. "You'll regret this. All of you. You can't run a neighborhood without me." But her words fell flat. The power had shifted. She wasn't the queen anymore, she was just another homeowner, exposed and defeated. After the meeting, neighbors gathered around Daniel, clapping him on the back, thanking him for standing up when no one else dared. For the first time since moving in, he felt the neighborhood alive, not under fear but under unity. Still, Daniel knew Karen wasn't finished. People like her never went quietly. She'd scheme, she'd twist, she'd look for some way back into control. As he walked home under the cool night sky, Daniel's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This isn't over. You think you've won, soldier? Watch your back." Daniel stared at the message, his jaw tightening. He deleted it without replying, then slipped the phone into his pocket. Because he wasn't rattled. If Karen wanted to play shadow games, she'd find out the hard way that he'd already been through worse. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was justice. And Daniel wasn't done until Karen learned, once and for all, that her reign of terror was finished. The cul-de-sac looked deceptively calm that morning. The sun painted the rows of identical houses in shades of gold, sprinklers hissed across lawns, and kids pedaled bikes with streamers fluttering in the breeze. To anyone passing by, the neighborhood was normal, almost idyllic. But for Jack, the army vet who had endured combat deployments, long nights on foreign soil, and the petty tyranny of one HOA Karen, this was not just another suburban morning. Because today, everything was coming to a head. Jack stood on his porch, arms crossed, waiting. He had learned patience in the army, the kind of patience that came from lying motionless in the desert heat, waiting for orders, waiting for extraction, waiting for dawn. But this patience was different. This was the patience of a man who knew justice was only minutes away. And Karen? She didn't know it yet, but the last package she would ever steal was on its way. The events of the last week had been nothing short of chaos. Karen had escalated from petty theft to public humiliation, from false police reports to nighttime sabotage. She had tried everything to drive Jack out or break him down. But in doing so, she had underestimated him. Underestimated what it meant to be a soldier who had faced life and death stakes and refused to quit. She thought stealing boxes was a game. For Jack, every missing package was a test of discipline, restraint, and principle. And today he was done playing defense. When the brown UPS truck rounded the corner, Jack's jaw tightened. This was the moment. The driver hopped out, cheerful as always, unaware of the storm about to unfold. "Morning, Jack," the man called. "Got a big one for you today. Needs a signature." Jack signed, thanked him, and lifted the box with deliberate care. Inside wasn't just merchandise. It was bait. A carefully planned, perfectly executed setup. He placed it on the porch, centered it under the camera he had installed, and stepped back inside, leaving the door slightly ajar. Then he waited. Karen spotted it within 10 minutes. She was walking her dog. Though the poor animal looked like it hated the harness as much as the HOA hated personal freedom, when her hawk eyes landed on the package. Her lips curled. Jack had grown used to that look over the weeks. It was the look of someone who believed the world owed them control, the look of someone who thought rules applied to others, never to themselves. She pretended to adjust her leash, looked left, then right. And with a speed that betrayed her years of practice, Karen waddled onto Jack's porch. Jack's heart pounded in his chest. Not from fear, not from anger, but from anticipation. He felt like a soldier on overwatch, watching a target step directly into the trap. Karen bent down, snatched the package, and tucked it under her arm. She didn't notice the small blinking light just above her head. She didn't notice the timer. She didn't notice the weight shifting strangely inside the box. Jack nearly laughed. The second she cleared the porch, the box emitted a piercing beep. Karen froze, eyes wide, and for a split second she looked like she had just stolen live ordnance. "What the?" she stammered, fumbling. The box hissed and popped. A cloud of bright pink smoke erupted into the air, covering Karen in a glittery haze. She coughed, dropped the box and stumbled backward, covered head to toe in neon sparkles. The neighborhood erupted. Kids pointed, parents gasped, and one neighbor across the street doubled over in laughter. Phones whipped out, cameras zoomed in, and within seconds Karen's victory had turned into the most humiliating moment of her life. Jack stepped onto his porch, arms crossed, calm as a commander who had just watched a flawless operation unfold. "Lose something?" he asked. Karen sputtered. "Why you set me up." Jack shrugged. "Or maybe you set yourself up. You could have just walked past." The police showed up 5 minutes later. But this time the dynamic was different. Jack didn't stand on his porch defending himself against accusations. He stood tall, calm, with half the neighborhood ready to testify. The footage from his cameras rolled live on a neighbor's iPad, capturing every second of Karen's theft and her spectacular glitter explosion. The officers didn't even bother asking Jack questions. They turned to Karen, their expressions a mix of irritation and disbelief. "Ma'am," one officer said, "is there a reason you were stealing your neighbor's package?" Karen flailed, still coughing pink smoke. It wasn't stealing. It was abandoned. I was protecting it." The crowd laughed. Jack couldn't help but grin. The second officer sighed, pulled out a notepad and began writing. Karen shrieked, tried to argue, but the glitter clinging to her hair and the cameras pointed at her destroyed whatever credibility she had left. Jack just stood there, silent, letting the scene play out. He didn't need to fight. He had already won. Later that evening, after the police car had driven off with Karen in the back seat, still sparkling like a disco ball, Jack sat on his porch with a beer. For the first time in weeks, the street felt light. Neighbors waved at him. Kids laughed every time they replayed the video on their parents' phones. Even the UPS driver drove by honking, giving Jack a thumbs up. But beneath the humor and the victory, Jack felt something else, something deeper. It wasn't just about Karen anymore. It was about control, about standing up to people who thought they could trample others without consequence. For years, he had fought battles overseas for the principles of freedom, fairness, and justice. Now he realized that sometimes, those same battles happened in your own backyard, against enemies who didn't carry rifles but carried clipboards and HOA bylaws. He sipped his beer, watching the sunset. And then, just as peace seemed to settle in, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. A message. A known number. "This isn't over." "Okay." Jack stared at it for a long moment, then chuckled under his breath. "Of course it isn't," he muttered. Because if there was one thing the army had taught him, it was that victory didn't always mean the fight was finished. Sometimes the real battle began the moment you thought you'd won. And deep down, Jack knew one truth about Karen. Glitter might wash off, but grudges didn't. The end.